For years, the neighborhood had followed a simple tradition. When families needed to declutter, when elderly couple decided to downsize, or when someone just wanted to clear out some old furniture, they would set up a garage sale. It was a normal, harmless part of suburban life. But then, Karen joined the HOA board, and suddenly, garage sales were declared illegal. The ban Karen's new community standard. Karen had always been one of those HOA members, the kind who inspected houses with a clipboard, issued violation notices for minor infractions, and acted like she was the queen of the entire neighborhood. But when she got elected to the HOA board, things got 10 times worse. Her first community improvement initiative? Banning garage sales. The official announcement came in the form of a passive-aggressive HOA email to all homeowners. In an effort to maintain the aesthetic and prestige of our community, the HOA board has voted to prohibit individual garage sales. These events create clutter, attract unwanted visitors, and diminish the neighborhood's appeal. Any unauthorized sales will result in fines and possible further action. Please be advised that this rule will be enforced immediately. Thank you for maintaining the integrity of our community. People were outraged. Since when do garage sales make a neighborhood look bad? How does she even have the authority to ban this? This isn't a gated community. We own our homes, not Karen. But Karen didn't care. She had decided that garage sales were tacky, and now they were gone. Or so she thought. The elderly couple who refused to back down. A few months after the ban, an elderly couple in the neighborhood, Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, made an announcement. They were downsizing. They had lived in the neighborhood for over 30 years, but now that their kids were grown and they were getting older, they had decided to move into a smaller home. They didn't have the energy or space to take everything with them. So, naturally, they planned to hold a garage sale. They had no idea about the new rule. But Karen, she knew immediately. Karen's first threat, the warning letter. The Dawsons had barely set up their tables before they found a notice taped to their door. From the HOA. From Karen. It read, "Notice of violation, unauthorized sale. It has come to the attention of the HOA board that you are hosting an unauthorized garage sale in direct violation of community regulations. Failure to cease this activity immediately will result in a $500 fine and further action." The Dawsons were confused. Since when are garage sales against the rules? What do they expect us to do with all this stuff? They tried calling the HOA office, but of course, they got no response. So they made a decision. They were going to hold the sale anyway. Karen's outrage, the day of the sale. Saturday morning arrived, and the Dawsons set up their sale. A few tables in the driveway. A couple of signs pointing to their house. Some old furniture, clothes, books, and household items for sale. It was a normal garage sale. Except this time, Karen showed up. Karen's meltdown, threats, and tantrums. At 9:30 a.m., a black SUV came screeching into the Dawsons' driveway. Karen jumped out, armed with her clipboard and phone. She marched right up to Mrs. Dawson and thrust a paper in her face. "This sale is illegal," she snapped. "You are in direct violation of HOA policy. You need to shut this down now." Mrs. Dawson, calm but firm, simply said, "We're just trying to downsize, Karen. We've lived here longer than you. We're not hurting anyone." Karen's eyes twitched. "This is making our neighborhood look trashy," she spat. "We are not some low-income community that hosts yard sales like we're at a flea market." People had started to gather. Neighbors, potential customers. Everyone was watching. And then, Karen made her biggest mistake yet. Karen calls security, but it backfires immediately. Karen pulled out her phone and dialed the number. "Security? Yes, we have an unauthorized garage sale happening at 245 Oakwood Drive. I need immediate enforcement." Mr. Dawson laughed. "Security? You mean those two guys who sit at the community center? You think they have authority over us?" Karen's smug grin faltered. The neighborhood wasn't on her side. In fact, people started buying things faster. Some neighbors even brought extra tables and set up their own items to sell. By 10 a.m., the Dawsons' garage sale had tripled in size. What was once one small sale had become a neighborhood-wide event. And Karen, she was losing it. Karen had intended to shut down the Dawsons' garage sale. She had shown up furious, throwing around HOA violations and threatening fines. She had even called security, expecting them to forcibly shut it down. But instead of stopping the sale, she made it go viral. Because the moment she started causing a scene, the neighborhood took notice. And what started as one couple trying to downsize became the biggest community event the neighborhood had ever seen. The community joins in. If they get fined, we all get fined. As Karen argued with the Dawsons, more and more neighbors showed up. People who had never spoken to each other before were now talking, laughing, and bonding over Karen's meltdown. Some residents opened their garages and brought out their own items to sell. If they get fined, we all get fined, one man said, dragging out a table full of books. Another neighbor set up a cooler with drinks and snacks, turning the garage sale into a mini festival. One family even brought out a speaker and started playing music. It wasn't just a garage sale anymore. It was a movement. And Karen, she was losing control. Karen's second attempt, threatening everyone. Karen's face was bright red. She spun around, pointing her clipboard at random people. "This is all illegal," she screeched. "You are all breaking HOA rules." But instead of stopping, people just ignored her. Someone even handed her soda and said, "Relax, Karen. It's just a garage sale." That's when she snapped. She whipped out her phone and began taking pictures of everyone. "I'm reporting every single one of you," she shouted. "You will all be fined." People just laughed, because at this point, nobody cared anymore. The HOA had been pushing people around for too long, and Karen had finally pushed them too far. The money pile, raising funds to cover the fines. Then someone had a genius idea. If she's going to fine us, let's raise money to cover the fines. And within minutes, a donation box was set up. People threw in cash, spare change, and even Venmo donations. One guy pulled out his wallet and slammed down $100. "That's for the Dawsons. Let's see Karen try to take their money." By the end of the hour, over $3,000 had been raised. Karen had threatened the neighborhood with fines, and the neighborhood turned it into a fundraiser. At that point, she was on the verge of a full breakdown. Karen's meltdown, she calls the police. Karen's last resort, she called the cops. With trembling fingers, she dialed 911. "Yes, I need the police at 245 Oakwood Drive. There is an illegal garage sale happening. It's causing chaos. People are everywhere. It's a public safety risk." Everyone watched her in disbelief. She was really calling 911 over a garage sale. People recorded her, laughing as she ranted into the phone. "It's out of control," she yelled. "It's turning into a block party. It needs to be stopped." At that point, she sounded completely unhinged. But she was about to face the biggest humiliation of all. Because when the police finally arrived, they did nothing. The police arrive, and they're not on Karen's side. A patrol car rolled up, and an officer stepped out. Karen practically sprinted toward him. "Officer, finally, you need to shut this down." The officer looked confused. He turned to look at the garage sale, the happy neighbors, the peaceful crowd, and then he turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, what exactly is the emergency?" Karen's jaw dropped. "They're having a garage sale. It's against the rules. It makes the neighborhood look trashy." The officer raised an eyebrow. "So, you called 911 over a garage sale?" "Yes." He sighed. "Ma'am, garage sales aren't illegal." Karen's face twitched. "But the HOA rules." "HOA rules aren't laws," the officer interrupted. "If this isn't breaking a city ordinance, I can't do anything." Karen froze. But they're ruining the neighborhood." The officer crossed his arms. "Ma'am, unless you're reporting an actual crime, I suggest you stop wasting police resources." Then he turned to the crowd and said, "Y'all have a nice day." And just like that, he left. Karen? She stood there, shaking in rage, humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood. She had called the cops, and even they didn't take her seriously. At that moment, Karen finally realized she had lost. Karen had called the cops on a garage sale, and the cops had laughed her off. Her one chance to shut it down had backfired spectacularly. right in front of the entire neighborhood. Any reasonable person would have accepted defeat and walked away. But Karen, she wasn't done yet. Because when you live your life obsessed with controlling others, losing control is the worst thing that can happen. And Karen, she was about to have her biggest meltdown yet. Karen storms home, but she's not giving up. After the police left, Karen did something no one expected. Instead of retreating quietly, she stormed back to her house, slammed the door, and disappeared inside. For a moment, the neighborhood thought, finally, it's over. People started laughing, sharing the story, and celebrating their victory. But then, something strange happened. Less than an hour later, Karen came back, and this time, she had reinforcements. Karen calls the HOA board, trying to get backup. Karen returned to the sale, but this time she wasn't alone. Two other HOA board members, a man named Greg, the HOA president, and a woman named Linda, the treasurer, followed behind her, looking serious. Karen was smirking again, clipboard in hand, acting like she had just called in the cavalry. "All right, fun's over," Karen said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Greg stepped forward. "We're shutting this down," he announced. "This is an HOA violation, and there will be fines." The crowd stared at them. "The police literally told you this isn't illegal," someone pointed out. "HOA rules are not laws," another added. But Karen, she was grinning like a villain in a movie. She held up a stack of fine notices and said, "You all might not care now, but when you get these in the mail, we'll see who's laughing." People muttered in frustration. Was this how far she was willing to go? The garage sale had turned into a community event. People were having fun, and now she was threatening everyone. But Karen had one last surprise. She pulled out her phone and started dialing another number. And this time, it wasn't 911. It was the HOA's lawyer. The legal threat: Karen tries to sue the neighborhood. Karen put the call on speaker so everyone could hear. "Yes, hello," she said, trying to sound professional. "I need legal action taken against multiple homeowners for violation of HOA policies." The lawyer sighed loudly. "Karen, what is it this time?" "They're holding an illegal garage sale." Karen snapped. "They're refusing to comply with HOA guidelines, and they mocked law enforcement." The lawyer paused. Then he said the exact words Karen didn't want to hear. "Karen, the HOA can't enforce this." The crowd erupted into laughter. Karen's face twisted in horror. "What do you mean?" she screeched. "We ban garage sales." "Yes, but HOA policies don't override city laws," the lawyer explained. "We can't fine people for something that isn't actually illegal." Karen turned bright red. But they're ruining the neighborhood." The lawyer sighed again. "Karen, do not call me again for something like this." Click. The call ended. Karen stood there, her entire world crumbling around her. Her last lifeline was gone. And the neighborhood? They exploded with applause. The HOA board starts to crack. Greg and Linda turn on Karen. Greg and Linda, the other HOA board members, had watched this entire disaster unfold. And now, they looked exhausted. Greg ran a hand down his face. "Karen, you said this was an enforceable rule." Linda crossed her arms. "You told us we had legal backing." Karen whipped around. "We do," she shrieked. "We just need to find a lawyer that—" But Greg cut her off. "No, Karen, we don't." The crowd fell silent. "You've been going on a power trip for months," Greg continued. "Fining people for nonsense, calling security over nothing. Hell, you just called the police over a garage sale." Linda nodded. "We've been getting complaints about you for a while, Karen." Karen's smug expression completely vanished. "Wait, you're taking their side," she gasped. "It's not about sides," Greg said. "You made us look like fools." Linda shook her head. "We're done protecting you." "Karen?" She looked like she was about to explode. Karen's nuclear meltdown, the breaking point. Karen's entire body shook with rage. She turned to the crowd, her eyes wild. "You ungrateful idiots," she shrieked. "I've been trying to protect this neighborhood. I have sacrificed my time for you. And this is how you repay me." People just stared. Then someone clapped sarcastically. "Great speech, Karen." Karen let out a frustrated scream. "You don't deserve me," she howled. "This neighborhood is going to fall apart without me." Then, in a final act of pure insanity, Karen grabbed one of the donation boxes, the one that had been collecting money to cover fines, and threw it into the street. Coins and cash spilled everywhere. And that was the final straw. The neighborhood takes action, the final vote. The next morning, an emergency HOA meeting was called. Greg and Linda introduced a new motion. Should Karen be permanently removed from the HOA board? The vote? Unanimous. Karen was officially kicked off the HOA board. She had lost everything. Her power? Gone. Her authority? Destroyed. Her influence? Shattered. And when the results were announced, the entire room erupted into cheers. Karen had been kicked off the HOA board. Her reign of terror was over. The neighborhood had cheered as the results of the vote were announced, severing her power for good. But if anyone thought Karen would accept defeat gracefully, they didn't know Karen. Because instead of walking away quietly, she spent the next few weeks plotting revenge. And what she did next was even more insane than everything before. Karen refuses to back down, the bitter aftermath. For the first time in years, Karen had no power over anyone. No one had to listen to her. No one had to follow her rules. No one had to fear her clipboard and bogus fines. And for Karen, that was unacceptable. At first, she tried to act like nothing had changed. She still patrolled the neighborhood, taking notes on things she didn't like. She still sent out emails, except now, no one read them. She still told people what to do, except now people just laughed. It was infuriating for her. Her commands had no weight. Her threats meant nothing. She had spent years controlling this neighborhood, and now she was just another homeowner. And that drove her insane. The HOA cleans up Karen's mess, undoing the damage. While Karen was stewing in her bitterness, the newly reformed HOA board was cleaning up the disaster she left behind. The first thing they did, undo every ridiculous rule Karen had put in place. At a special community meeting, the board made the following announcements. The garage sale ban was officially revoked. All unpaid fines related to Karen's made-up rules were voided. Moving forward, no HOA member would have the power to fine homeowners without a majority vote. People cheered. Karen's stranglehold on the neighborhood was finally over. But Karen, she was watching. And the more she saw the community celebrating her downfall, the more she plotted her comeback. Karen's letter campaign, trying to take back control. A few weeks later, strange letters started appearing in mailboxes. Each one had a familiar tone. The letter read, "To my dear neighbors, it is with great sadness that I have watched the decline of our once proud community. Since my unfair removal from the HOA board, I have seen an increase in unregulated activities that threaten the integrity of our neighborhood. I urge you to consider what we have lost. Without proper leadership, property values will plummet, crime will increase, and disorder will take hold. We must not let this happen. I am calling on all responsible homeowners to sign the attached petition to reinstate me as an HOA leader. Together, we can restore order and dignity to our community. Sincerely, Karen L. Patterson." People were stunned. This woman had been voted out by nearly the entire neighborhood, and now she was begging to be reinstated. But the funniest part, she didn't get a single signature. People threw the letters away without reading them. One person even taped the letter to Karen's front door with "No thanks" written on it in marker. Karen had tried to rally support and completely failed. But instead of accepting reality, she lost it. Karen snaps, her petty revenge begins. After her pathetic letter campaign flopped, Karen went from trying to reclaim her power to trying to make everyone's lives miserable. Over the next few weeks, strange things started happening. Trash cans went missing. People would put their bins out for collection, and the next morning, they were nowhere to be found. Noise complaints skyrocketed. Homeowners started receiving notices from the city about excessive noise, even though they had done nothing wrong. Mysterious complaints were sent to the HOA. One homeowner received a letter stating that they had too many plants on their porch, while another was told their car was parked an inch too close to the curb. At first, people thought it was random. But then, someone checked the security footage from their doorbell camera. And guess who was caught sneaking around at 2 a.m., moving trash cans and taking photos. Karen. Karen exposed. The neighborhood bands together. The moment the footage was posted in the community group chat, everything clicked. Karen was behind all of it. She wasn't just being petty. She was actively trying to cause chaos. People were furious. A group of homeowners confronted Karen on her front lawn. Karen, we know it's you. Stop messing with people's property. We have video of you sneaking around like a lunatic. Karen refused to admit it. She crossed her arms and sneered. I have no idea what you're talking about. That's when someone pulled out their phone and played the security footage right in front of her. Karen's face drained of color. She stammered, tried to make excuses. That's not me. That could be anyone. Karen, you're wearing the same robe right now. She looked down. She was literally wearing the same outfit as in the video. The crowd burst out laughing. Karen? She screamed in frustration and slammed the door in their faces. But at that moment, everyone knew. Karen was done. The final consequence, Karen's permanent downfall. The HOA board held one last meeting. And this time, there was only one thing on the agenda. How do we make sure Karen never causes trouble again? A new motion was introduced. Karen was officially banned from holding any leadership position in the HOA ever again. Any future complaints from Karen would be automatically reviewed for harassment before being considered. Karen was warned that if she trespassed on anyone's property again, legal action would be taken. It passed unanimously. Karen had spent years terrorizing the neighborhood. Now, she was powerless. And the best part, she couldn't do anything about it. Her control was gone. Her influence was dead. And the neighborhood, finally truly free. Karen had been completely stripped of power. Her HOA dictatorship had crumbled. Her attempt to reclaim control had failed. Her petty revenge campaign had been exposed. And now, the entire neighborhood was against her. Most people would have taken the loss and moved on. But Karen, she wasn't most people. She had spent years controlling every aspect of the community. And now that she had lost that control, she was spiraling. And when people like Karen lose power, they lash out in the worst ways possible. Karen becomes the neighborhood ghost, watching, waiting, plotting. After she was publicly exposed for messing with people's property, Karen disappeared. No more screaming at people about their lawns. No more patrolling the streets with a clipboard. No more ridiculous violation notices in the mail. It was eerie. For the first time in years, the neighborhood was Karen-free. But it didn't last. Because even though she wasn't actively harassing people anymore, she was watching. Neighbors started noticing strange things. Karen would sit in her car, parked at random spots in the neighborhood, just watching people. She would stand at her window, staring outside for hours, muttering to herself. Sometimes she would even walk down the street, stopping to glare at houses before storming back inside. It was like she was waiting for something. And then, she finally snapped. The middle of the night madness, Karen's last attack. One night at 2:30 a.m., the entire street was woken up by a loud crashing noise. At first, people thought it was an accident. But when they looked outside, they saw Karen, and she was losing it. She had a hammer in one hand, a garbage bag in the other, and she was smashing people's garden decorations. She knocked over potted plants, tore down wind chimes, and even tried to break a mailbox. She had completely lost her mind. Within minutes, someone called 911. Karen was screaming incoherently, ranting about how the neighborhood was ruined without her. By the time the police arrived, she was standing in the middle of the street, panting, surrounded by broken flower pots. And when the officers approached her, she tried to run. Karen's arrest, the final consequence. Karen made it about 5 steps before she tripped over her own feet. The police tackled her to the ground, handcuffing her immediately. She kicked and screamed, demanding they let her go. "I'm this community," she shrieked. "I built this neighborhood. I deserve respect." But the officers weren't having it. She was arrested on multiple counts of vandalism and trespassing. And when they searched her house, they found something even worse. Karen's hidden files, the HOA's dirty secrets. Inside Karen's house, police discovered folders full of documents. She had been keeping detailed records on everyone in the neighborhood. Lists of homeowners she approved and disapproved of. Printouts of private emails between board members. Records of complaints she had submitted under fake names. Even copies of security footage from other people's homes. Footage she had no right to have. Karen hadn't just been an annoying HOA president. She had been a full-blown stalker. And when this information came out, it was over for her. The court case, Karen faces justice. Karen was dragged into court a few weeks later, still acting like she had done nothing wrong. Her defense? She claimed that she had been pushed to the edge by an ungrateful community. She tried to argue that she was just trying to uphold order and protect the neighborhood. But the judge didn't buy it, especially after hearing the witness testimonies. Person after person took the stand, sharing their stories of how Karen had harassed them, fined them unfairly, and tried to control their lives. When the security footage of her midnight rampage was played in court, Karen's face turned pale. She knew she was done. The final verdict? Guilty of multiple counts of vandalism. Guilty of trespassing. Ordered to pay thousands in damages to homeowners. Sentenced to probation and mandatory counseling. And the best part? She was banned from holding any leadership position in an HOA ever again. Karen had spent years controlling people's lives. Now, she couldn't even legally attend an HOA meeting. Karen's final downfall, the ultimate karma. After the trial, Karen disappeared. Her house sat vacant for months before it was finally sold. She had spent years ruling the neighborhood like a dictator. But in the end, she was forced to leave it behind. And the neighborhood celebrated her departure. People threw a block party the day she moved out. One person even put up a "No Karens Allowed" sign on their lawn. The community was finally free. No more ridiculous fines. No more petty rules. No more power-hungry or tyranny. And the lesson? When a Karen tries to control everything, the only way to stop her is to fight back. And that's exactly what this neighborhood did. And they won. Karen had ruled the HOA with an iron fist for years. She had fined people for nonsense, tried to ban garage sales, spied on her neighbors, and even called the police over things that weren't illegal. But after her final meltdown, after she had been arrested, sued, and kicked out of the HOA forever, she was gone. And for the first time in years, the neighborhood could finally breathe. The day Karen left, a neighborhood celebration. When Karen's house finally sold, the entire neighborhood held its breath. Would a new owner be just as bad? Would another control freak take her place? But when the moving trucks arrived and Karen was forced to pack up and leave, people couldn't hold back their excitement. The neighborhood group chat exploded. She's actually leaving. It's really happening, guys. No more Karen. And then, one of the neighbors had a brilliant idea. Let's throw a block party. It started as a joke, but within hours, it became reality. People started firing up grills. Someone brought out a huge speaker and played music. Kids rode their bikes up and down the street, laughing freely. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt alive again. Karen had spent so much time crushing everyone's spirit, and now, people were reclaiming their joy. The "No Karens Allowed" sign, the ultimate farewell gift. As Karen's car pulled out of the driveway for the last time, she had to drive past the biggest reminder of her failure. Someone had put up a huge homemade sign on their front lawn. It read, "Goodbye, Karen, don't come back." And below it, in smaller letters, "No Karens Allowed in this." The entire crowd burst into cheers as she drove away. Karen? She sped up and peeled out of the neighborhood, humiliated. And that was it. She was gone for good. Fixing what Karen broke, the HOA's complete overhaul. With Karen gone, the new board wasted no time fixing everything she had messed up. In a massive community meeting, the following changes were made. All Karen-era rules were erased. No more garage sale bans, no more petty fines, no more insane restrictions. The HOA could no longer issue fines without a full board vote. No more dictatorship. Board members had term limits. Nobody would ever have unchecked power again. All HOA meetings had to be recorded and shared publicly. No more secret backroom decisions. Homeowners now had the right to challenge HOA rules with a majority vote. If the community didn't like something, they could reject it. For the first time in years, the HOA was actually fair. No longer a weapon for power-hungry people. No longer a tool for personal vendettas. Just a simple organization meant to help the community. And honestly, it felt amazing. The first HOA meeting without Karen, a breath of fresh air. The first official HOA meeting without Karen was completely different. No yelling, no condescending lectures, no Karen threatening to fine people. Instead, people actually discussed things like adults. They talked about real issues like improving the playground, adding speed bumps, and organizing more community events. Things that actually mattered. And the biggest highlight of the night, a motion was passed to officially prohibit any HOA president from acting unilaterally. This meant that no future Karen could ever rise again. And when the final vote was counted, 100% approval. Karen had spent years ruling the HOA like a tyrant. Now, she couldn't even set foot in a meeting. How the neighborhood changed, a true community again. With Karen's toxic influence finally gone, things started changing fast. People weren't afraid to be outside anymore. Before, homeowners had been terrified that they'd be fined for leaving their trash cans out for too long or having the wrong shade of flowers in their front yard. Now, people actually talked to each other. Families hosted barbecues in their driveways without fear of Karen complaining about unauthorized gatherings. Kids rode their bikes freely without Karen threatening to call security. Neighbors actually helped each other instead of snitching on each other for minor rule violations. The community became stronger. Karen had wanted to control everything. But now, people realized they were better off without her. Karen's legacy, running joke. Even though Karen was gone, her name lived on. As a joke. Anytime someone complained about something stupid, people would say, "Relax, Karen." If anyone suggested a ridiculous rule, someone else would joke. Sounds like something Karen would do. She had spent years acting like she was the most powerful person in the neighborhood. And now, she was just a punchline. And honestly, that was the best revenge of all. Final reflection, the neighborhood's lesson. When this whole nightmare started, nobody had thought they could stand up to Karen. She had controlled everything, used the HOA as her personal weapon, and made people feel powerless. But in the end, the community fought back. They stood together. And they won. Because at the end of the day, no HOA should ever have unchecked power. No neighborhood should ever be ruled by fear. And no Karen should ever be allowed to take over again.